Here Jesus is continuing the theme as he began yesterday on power and authority. We'll remember yesterday that he does not condemn authority. He actually doubles down and he affirms the legitimacy of authority, the legitimacy of the authority of some people over others. Parents over their children, teachers over their students, lords or masters over their slaves or their servants. And indeed, those who are professional, I should say, expert in some manner of profession over those who are disciples. These are good things. It's good to have this authority. It's good to have this leadership. We would be lost without it. But it has to be used in the appropriate manner. And this is where Jesus yesterday spent a lot of time sort of illustrating that, well, actually here, that he spends a lot of time illustrating that there's a difference in the way that those who seek worldly power for their own gain exercise that authority over those who have that authority and use it purely for the good of others. So he says the Gentiles lord their power or lord their authority over their subjects. Right? This is a matter of causing those who are subject to one in authority to fear them. This person is out for themselves. They're going to use their power to get something from me to enrich themselves. This is the way of the world. This is why there's always corruption in every level of government, worldly, terrestrial government. And indeed, there's corruption in every level of authority, even within the church. Because people, well-meaning as they may be, are inclined to, they're inclined to corruption. Right? We know the adage that power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Right? The antidote or the remedy to this, the way that a human being can be entrusted by God with power in a way that does not corrupt them, is to be entrusted with it and to wield it only as Christ has exemplified. To receive power, to receive authority, legitimate authority, divine authority of God over others, merely so that you can make them better. God has given authority to, let's say God has given authority to kings. Why? Not so the king could become greedy and claim for himself entitlement over the possessions of all of those of his subjects, but rather so that the king can use the power of leadership, of direction, and even in terms of levying taxes or taking from from his subjects, in order to create or to mold a society that is just and equitable, so that the general good or the common good, so that the common good can be established throughout that realm. Yes, he has the power to hurt people. Yes, he has the power to condemn people. Yes, he has the power to take from people. But that power is meant to be used in order to establish the common good and equity and justice for everybody. That's the way that's meant to be used. But because kingship is oftentimes directed merely towards terrestrial realities, it is very easily turned towards corruption. Right? Why? What's the point? Why am I gaining this stuff? Well, I want glory for myself. Even the delusion that, I just want glory for my realm. But rather, I see the power that I have received as an instrument to be used by me, not for me, but for others. Right? And this is you can see even in the boys here that they are a little bit, and the mother too, they're a little bit deluded still by, not deluded, they're a little bit disordered in their desire for power, for position. James and John here, the sons of Zebedee, whose mother approaches Jesus and says, let them sit at the left and the right. Perhaps if this question had been asked in the Spirit that Jesus would have received it, it would have been granted. Let my sons sit at your left and your right, that they may never be far from you. Sure. But in fact, this question was asked more in the tone of, let my sons be glorified in your sight and in the sight of their brethren. Let them be raised above their peers and give them power and authority over and above those around them. Let them therefore sit at your right and your left. And Jesus says, why? They've got all the power and authority they need. They've already asked me if they could call down thunder, and I had to tell them no, because if I told them yes, they would have been able to do it. They have all the power and authority they need. Ultimately, what power and authority does a Christian need but to be able to drink the cup that Jesus drinks? Which is to say, to drink the dregs of martyrdom, to empty oneself completely for the sake of others. That is true power. To be able to, the truest power is the ability to command oneself, to empty oneself completely for another. That is to say that true power is true love. The self-emptying and the self-denial, to drink the cup that Jesus drinks. That's what Jesus promises Christians. That's the empowerment that he promises us. A power of self-control. And from that self-control, the power to empty ourselves for the good of others. According to our relationship with them, of course. You empty yourself for your spouse before you empty yourself for your children, and you empty yourself for your children before you empty yourself for your tribe. That's obvious. Well, maybe it's not obvious. It's actually not obvious. People do that wrong all the time. But who and what we seek to become, we should seek to manifest that destiny, not for our own glory, but for the good of others. And in that way, we approximate Jesus, who is all-powerful, who has all power and dominion given over to him. Now, I oftentimes reference books when I'm trying to make a point, but that usually falls flat on its face, so I'll use a movie. Scathing indictment of today's culture. Has anybody seen, we'll talk, I won't ask you to raise your hand, but we'll talk about Schindler's List. There's a beautiful scene that portrays, it's a terrible scene, that portrays the difference here between the use of power that Jesus is talking about. Schindler is sitting with some Nazi colonel who's in charge of a concentration camp, and the colonel's going on and on about the power and authority he wields, the power over life. He can take life from his people anytime he wants. I think he may be telling an anecdote where somebody just kind of displeased him or walked by, and some Jew walked by and gave him a dirty look, and he just shot him. He's like, how powerful I am. And Schindler, recognizing that the Nazi Third Reich is trying to emblemize or manifest the old Roman Empire, he uses this image. He says, you know what? In the Roman Empire, many people were able to take life, but there was only one man, the source of true power, who could give life back, who could give clemency, who could forgive and restore. And that right was reserved to the emperor. No one could pardon a capital crime except the emperor. A whole bunch of people could execute folks, but only one could liberate. And he says that's true power. And then later in the movie, I'm not sure if it's the next scene or not, this same colonel, struck by these words of Schindler, has some Jewish boy like trying to get some stain out of his bathtub or something stupid like that. And he couldn't do it. What's that? Sorry, I thought somebody was talking. And he, so what were we talking about, bathtubs? Yeah, so couldn't get the stain out of the bathtub. And he's just roiling inside. You could see it on his face. He just wants to destroy this kid. But he's thinking, he's remembering what Schindler was talking about. And so, like, just almost like as if he was going to just slap the kid, he just finally restrains himself and pats him on the cheek and lets him go. And so the little boy's running out of the house, going back to mom and dad, and then all of a sudden, boom! He couldn't do it. He just walked out on his balcony and shot the kid. He was that evil. He could not manifest this greater good. He didn't have the power to wield. He didn't have the internal strength, the character, the fortitude to wield that true power. And that's what we see in the world, is that the world is so often enslaved, not so often, but is so enslaved by the devil that it can only exercise power to a point, and it's only to the point of being able to destroy. But Christ comes to give true liberty, a liberty where we do not feel the need to destroy. We don't feel the need to gain retribution. We don't feel the need to hurt and to harm and to kill, but rather within ourselves we find this delight in our relationship with the Lord and the power that He gives us in being called sons of God, that we now dare to hope to create. We dare to hope to give life. We dare to hope to be able to forgive our enemy in a way that only the imperial power is able. And my friends, that's what we have as Christians. Imperial power. A power shared with us by God, who alone is truly the wielder of that power. The one who alone can forgive. He says to his brethren, he says, whose sins you forgive are forgiven. This doesn't just apply to the sacrament of confession, which it most perfectly applies to, but it also applies to every Christian who has ever been hurt by anyone else. God gives you the power to forgive. So that your anger and your hatred and your bitterness does not consume you, but you're healed by that forgiveness. So that the rift caused by the betrayal or the sin between neighbors, between friends, can be healed and communion can be restored. What power? What if the whole world used that power? What if the whole world acknowledged God as God and the source of all power, received that power from Him and used it the way that He asked? Imagine. Now, we can't make the world use power appropriately, but we can pursue it for ourselves. Understand what true power is. Understand that you have been given that true power, and use it for the reason that God has given it to you. Not to lord it over, not to aggrandize yourself, not to hurt, but in humility, to empty yourself for the good of another, to use that power to gut yourself, to give what others need, so that they can receive what God has already given you: freedom, life, communion, and friendship. These are the things that true power are directed towards. As Christians, let us always strive to achieve the goal God has set for us by giving us such power.